Most people think the greatest danger of growth is failure. It's not. The real danger is what happens when you succeed, when you actually start outgrowing everyone around you. You think it'll feel powerful, but what you don't realize is that it begins with a quiet loneliness that only grows sharper with time. You wake up one day and realize you no longer fit into the same conversations, the same patterns, the same rooms that once made you feel alive. And yet, every time you try to move forward, someone close to you looks at you like you've become arrogant. That's when you understand what Machiavelli meant when he warned that the reformer has enemies in all those who profit by the old order, and only lukewarm defenders in all those who might profit by the new. Outgrowing people isn't just a shift in relationships. It's a rebellion against the emotional systems that once controlled you. When you evolve, you're not simply changing your goals. You're altering the social contract that bound you to others. Every friendship, every bond, every habit was built on a shared level of understanding. When your mind changes, that contract silently breaks. You see through things they still defend. You question what they still follow. You begin to move differently, and that difference threatens them. Most people want you to grow, just not past them. They'll cheer for you to improve, as long as your improvement doesn't force them to confront their own stagnation. When your reflection reminds them of their lack of progress, they start to withdraw. They'll disguise it as concern. You're changing. You've become distant. You're not the same anymore. But what they're really saying is, I can't see myself in you anymore, and that makes me uncomfortable. Machiavelli would have told you to expect this, because every gain in power, mental, emotional, or social, creates imbalance, and imbalance demands correction. The people who once praised your ambition will try to normalize you again. They'll use guilt, nostalgia, or mockery to pull you back into their world. They'll say you're obsessed, that you've forgotten where you came from. But make no mistake, this is not about love. It's about control. They want you back in the role that served their comfort. And if you allow their discomfort to dictate your pace, you'll shrink yourself to stay accepted. There's a reason the wise move in silence. When you're evolving, visibility becomes a liability. The more people see your transformation, the more opinions you invite. The weak will criticize what they can't comprehend, and the envious will disguise their jealousy as advice. They'll tell you to slow down, to be humble, to stay grounded. But notice, they never say that to those who failed. They only say it to those rising. And this is where the danger sharpens. When you start believing them, when you begin to feel guilty for surpassing those you once admired. It's subtle at first. You'll hesitate before speaking your ideas. You'll downplay your wins. You'll second-guess your own clarity. You start dimming your light, hoping to protect others from their shadows. But what Machiavelli understood better than most was that guilt is a political weapon. The moment you start feeling guilty for your strength, you become governable. People rarely admit it, but they don't want equals. They want mirrors. Someone who reflects their worldview, their choices, their justifications. When you stop reflecting them, they feel unseen. They start convincing themselves that you've changed for the worse, when in reality, you've just stopped pretending. That's why the danger of outgrowing everyone isn't isolation. It's the illusion that you're the problem. Here's a truth no one prepares you for. Evolution feels like betrayal. When you decide to pursue better, it often looks like abandonment to those who haven't. They'll paint you as cold, detached, even disloyal, and maybe you'll start to believe it. But Machiavelli would call that a necessary cruelty, the kind you must accept to build something greater than comfort. He warned that those who seek to rise must learn to be not always good, because goodness, in the social sense, means compliance. And if your growth depends on others' approval, it's not growth, it's permission. There's a quiet skill in learning how to distance yourself without declaring war. Some people deserve explanation, others deserve your absence. The wise learn to vanish gradually, not dramatically. When you start growing, don't announce it. Just let your habits shift. Let your silence speak. Every hour you spend explaining yourself to someone committed to misunderstanding you is an hour stolen from your evolution. You'll start noticing the gap widening in small ways. Conversations that once inspired you will start feeling like echoes. The advice that once guided you will start sounding shallow. You'll crave solitude not because you hate people, but because it's the only place left where your mind can stretch without judgment. Solitude becomes your forge, the space where your thoughts sharpen, your emotions stabilize, and your next identity begins to form. But here's the paradox. While solitude protects your growth, it also tests your resolve. When the noise fades, so do the validations. You'll question yourself more deeply than ever. You'll wonder if you've become heartless, detached, or narcissistic. You'll miss the warmth of belonging. But Machiavelli would remind you, belonging often demands obedience, and no one achieves power, intellectual or otherwise, by staying obedient to mediocrity. The moment you start valuing truth over comfort, you outgrow 90% of people. Because truth is abrasive. It doesn't flatter. It forces you to confront what you've been avoiding. When you start living by truth, you stop participating in collective delusions. You no longer entertain meaningless conversations or exaggerated emotions. You see manipulation in real time, and that awareness makes you appear colder. But it's not coldness, it's clarity. Eventually, you'll face a choice. You can dilute yourself to stay connected, or you can preserve your evolution at the cost of connection. Most people choose the former, and that's why growth plateaus. They pick belonging over authenticity. But if you've truly understood Machiavelli's nature, you'll see that survival doesn't belong to the agreeable. It belongs to the adaptive. You might think cutting people off is the solution. It's not. That's too simple. The real mastery lies in keeping your heart intact, while no longer depending on anyone to validate it. It's about developing emotional sovereignty, the kind that no approval or rejection can shake. When you reach that point, relationships stop being cages and start becoming choices. But let's not romanticize this stage. It's not glamorous. It's heavy. You'll mourn the people you've outgrown like ghosts. You'll remember their laughter, the shared chaos, the comfort, and yet, you'll know you can never truly go back. Because what once bonded you was illusion, the illusion that you both saw the world the same way. Once that illusion breaks, you can still care, but you can't return. That's the hidden cost of awakening. You don't just lose people, you lose versions of yourself that needed them. And this loss changes the way you move. You stop trying to convince. You stop arguing with those committed to their own limits. You learn that energy must be guarded as fiercely as money. Because when you waste it on those who won't grow, you're not helping them. You're betraying yourself. The higher you climb, the thinner the air. Not everyone is meant to breathe with you there. And that's not cruelty. It's design. Machiavelli would say it's the natural hierarchy of progress. Growth filters people. The more you refine yourself, the fewer remain. And those who do, those are not just friends. They are your true allies, people who challenge you without resenting you, who evolve beside you rather than behind you. But the journey to find them starts with letting go, not with bitterness, but with clarity. Because if you cling to who you've outgrown, you'll delay who you're meant to become. And while they stay comfortable, you'll stay conflicted. The hardest truth about outgrowing everyone is this: you can't drag anyone into a mindset they haven't suffered enough to earn. Some lessons only pain can teach, and not everyone is ready to learn yet. The danger, then, is not that you'll lose people. It's that you'll stop your own evolution out of guilt. You'll start lowering your standards, shrinking your dreams, softening your edges, just to remain relatable. And the more you do, the more your spirit resents you for it. Because deep down, it knows you were never meant to blend in. You were meant to outgrow. And if you ever doubt that, remember, growth is supposed to feel lonely. The tree doesn't apologize to the seeds for breaking the ground they never left. It just keeps reaching higher until the sunlight feels natural again. That's how you'll know you finally escaped the danger. Not when you're understood, but when you no longer need to be. But here's where the story turns from survival to strategy. Because if you stop at merely outgrowing others, you risk becoming isolated without influence. And Machiavelli never glorified isolation. He studied how to turn distance into power. Growth only becomes dangerous when it lacks direction. When you detach from your old circles but fail to build new ones aligned with your evolution, you end up suspended, too evolved for the old world, too uncertain for the new. That's where many collapse. They confuse detachment with strength and solitude with strategy. But power, as Machiavelli knew, requires structure. You don't rise by separating from everything. You rise by connecting to something greater: purpose, mastery, order. The first strategic rule once you've outgrown everyone is this: don't rush to replace them. Most people panic at the silence left behind by old friends, so they fill it with noise. New people, new groups, new distractions. But Machiavelli would have seen that as foolish. He would tell you to let the void breathe. Let it show you what you've been avoiding. Because in that silence, you begin to see your patterns. You realize who you were performing for, whose approval you were addicted to, which emotions made you predictable. The danger of outgrowing people isn't loneliness. It's failing to understand what that loneliness is teaching you. Once you've studied the silence, you'll start to feel a strange peace in it. That's your signal that you're no longer dependent. That's when you become truly dangerous. Not because you've stopped caring, but because you now choose when to care. You'll stop reacting to others' opinions, not out of indifference, but out of understanding. You'll see that most criticism is projection, people voicing what they fear becoming. When someone calls you selfish for focusing on yourself, what they're really saying is, "I wish I had your discipline." When they accuse you of arrogance, they're revealing how threatened they feel by your independence. Machiavelli would urge you to weaponize this understanding, not against others, but against your own weaknesses. Every emotion others try to provoke in you is a potential lever of control. Once you learn to see it, their influence dissolves. They can gossip, exclude, misjudge, but you'll remain untouched. Because the moment you stop seeking to be understood, you gain control of perception itself. You can shape it instead of defending against it. That's how leaders are born, not from being liked, but from mastering how they are perceived. There's another danger few talk about: the arrogance of growth. When you first rise above your surroundings, it's easy to mistake distance for superiority. You look back and feel disgust for who you once were, for the conversations you once tolerated. But that disgust is poison disguised as pride, because the higher you rise, the more you need humility as armor. Machiavelli admired intelligence, but he respected restraint even more. He believed that the truly powerful never need to prove they're ahead. Their calm presence alone creates hierarchy. So when you start outgrowing people, don't announce it with words, announce it with peace. Let your detachment speak for itself. Don't correct every misunderstanding or respond to every subtle insult. Indifference is the final stage of dominance. When you can't be provoked, you can be controlled. But here's the subtle trap. The more you evolve, the less relatable you become. And the less relatable you become, the easier it is to be misunderstood. Your silence might look like judgment. Your clarity might feel like cruelty. You'll lose people not because you hurt them, but because your existence reminds them of what they refuse to confront. They'll talk about you as if you've changed, but the truth is, you've only stopped pretending. When that happens, remember Machiavelli's wisdom. It is better to be feared than loved, if you cannot be both. But don't mistake feared for aggressive power. In modern terms, it means respected through consistency. When you no longer seek validation, people instinctively respect your boundaries. They may not like you, but they'll measure themselves against you. That's power rooted in presence, not performance. Still, even Machiavelli knew fear alone couldn't sustain influence. If you remain too distant for too long, you risk becoming an island, untouchable, but also irrelevant. That's why the next step after detachment is selective re-engagement. You begin building alliances, not out of emotion, but alignment. People who don't drain you but challenge you. People whose presence doesn't comfort your ego, but sharpens your vision. That's how a new circle forms, not through history, but through trajectory. When you meet people on the same frequency, you'll feel it instantly. The conversations won't revolve around nostalgia or gossip. They'll orbit around creation, philosophy, execution. These are the relationships Machiavelli valued, the ones built on mutual elevation. You'll realize that connection doesn't die after growth. It just changes altitude. You stop bonding over shared wounds and start bonding over shared missions. And this transition brings a profound realization. Outgrowing everyone wasn't a punishment, it was preparation. You had to walk alone so you could see who was truly walking with you, not just beside you. You had to lose the applause to find your rhythm. You had to be misunderstood to learn how to lead without approval. Every layer of separation refined your discernment until what remains is pure, your purpose, your mind, your power. By this stage, you'll start seeing patterns others can't. You'll sense manipulation before words are spoken. You'll recognize fear disguised as friendliness. You'll see how most people aren't living. They're negotiating between comfort and fear of judgment. And you'll know you've outgrown the world when its noise starts sounding predictable. That's the freedom Machiavelli pointed toward, not rebellion for its own sake, but mastery of self amidst the illusions of others. But freedom alone isn't fulfillment. The final danger of outgrowing everyone is forgetting why you grew in the first place. Growth without purpose becomes vanity. You start chasing expansion just to feel alive, not realizing that you're now addicted to motion itself. You move from circle to circle, project to project, relationship to relationship, without ever landing. Machiavelli warned against this type of restless ambition. It destroys kings as easily as it builds them, because power, without direction, consumes itself. So pause. Ask yourself, what are you outgrowing for? Is it for peace, mastery, impact? Or is it just to escape the discomfort of staying still? Growth isn't meant to be endless chaos. It's meant to be refinement. You're not supposed to outgrow the world. You're supposed to outgrow your illusions of it. Eventually, you'll reach a rare clarity. You'll realize that outgrowing others isn't about superiority or rejection. It's about alignment. Some people are meant for certain chapters, and when that chapter ends, holding on to them is like trying to breathe underwater. You'll feel guilt, nostalgia, maybe even grief. But behind all of it, there's relief. Because deep down, you know you're finally free. And freedom, as Machiavelli would tell you, is the most dangerous form of power. Because once you taste it, you can never be controlled again. You can play any role, adapt to any crowd, wear any mask, but none of it owns you anymore. You become untouchable, not by isolation, but by understanding the game so deeply that you no longer need to win it. That's when you stop fearing the danger of outgrowing everyone, because you finally learn to walk alone, not as an exile, but as an emperor of your own mind.